Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 642. 642. December 22nd, 2018, Saturday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, at the time of this video, it's about 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Friday night. And at this time they are negotiating, having meetings in the Senate to try to find out if they can get this bill, with the spending bill, passed, if they can get the votes. They need 60 votes. And it does not appear at this time that they're going to get the 60 votes. It appears at this time there is going to be a government shutdown. Trump will not sign the bill unless it has $5 billion for the wall. That's what we are being told at this time. We're also hearing, though, that there is some negotiation going on and he may back off that figure. We just don't know because there's a lot of things being reported, and I don't think anyone really knows. Other than the fact that Trump has said, no, he's got to get wall funding or he will shut down the government. Now, we know that the majority of people, over 60% of the people, support defending the border, and that would, I would assume, mean that they're okay with the border wall. So this looks like an issue where Republicans would be able to win, but they still have to play their hand properly. And what they can't do is get weak in the knees at the end and cave and fold, which you got to watch Twitch McConnell. Anything is possible with Twitch. They could try some parliamentary game where maybe they just pass in these individual bills, because there's like 7 bills there, and they pass each one individually and get 6 of the 7 done and leave the wall out. Then Trump would be forced to individually veto 6 individual bills, including pay for border security, earthquake relief, hurricane relief, and the whole 9 yards. So this could be used, if Twitch McConnell wants to be a real a-hole, he could use this to really put the president in a pinch. So, it's a tricky, sticky wicket right now. How it's going to turn out, I don't know. But if I were a betting man, I would bet that they're not going to get the 60 votes. I don't even think that they'll get all the Republicans in the Senate. I don't think Corker is going to vote for it. I'd be surprised. I'm pretty damn sure that Jeff the Flake is not going to vote for it. So there'll be procedural votes to have the vote, and they'll probably vote for that. But that doesn't mean that they're going to vote for the final bill, which would include the funding for the border wall. So it is a pretty sticky wicket, but you're going to have to play this correctly on the public relations side. First of all, they need to make it perfectly clear on the Republican side, as far as the president's concerned, that 87% of the government gets funded automatically. The only thing we're talking about is non-discretionary spending, 13%. 87%, it's already there. It's already there. We're only talking about 13% of non-discretionary spending. So that needs to be made perfectly clear. But if in fact the Democrats do want to go this route and they don't want to provide the measly $5 billion for the border wall, then I certainly would understand Trump vetoing the bill. I think he has to, for political reasons, and I certainly would. And it's not just political reasons. He has real concerns about the border. And he also knows that this $5 billion will pay for itself, just in the money we save by not having to deal with all the issues caused by illegal immigration. But if the Democrats want to play this game, we know that public opinion is not on their side. Trump has popular public opinion on his side. But the Republicans are very weak in the knees and they're very inept. They're not used to fighting. Trump is. And that's what worries me. It's not how Trump will hold up. I'm worried about how Republicans will hold up outside the Freedom Caucus, who have done a marvelous job. But they're in the House. And come January 3rd, they're going to be in the minority. So it's going to fall to the Senate. And Twitch McConnell, I don't know. Sometimes Twitch is with you, sometimes he's not. Who knows? With Twitch McConnell. But I will say this. If I were advising the president on how to handle the PR side of this, which a lot of this is going to come down to the PR. Who's going to win the PR battle? Because once midnight comes, and unless they go for a 1, 2, or 3 day extension, you're going to have a shutdown. And the negative propaganda campaign will begin immediately. And of course, that we know that 95% of the corporate media is opposed to Trump, and they are left-wing. So they're automatically going to go after Trump big time, and Republicans. So they're going to have a strategy, a media PR campaign strategy, to battle against the left-wing forces. They're not going to just be able to leave it to Sarah Sanders to go out there in a press conference every day and restate the president's position. That is not going to work. If you're going to have this fight, you have to be prepared to fight the battle, and you have to be smart enough to know that a lot of this comes down to PR. You've got to win the PR battle in a government shutdown. Let me give a couple ideas just off the top of my head for anyone who may be watching around the executive branch or the president on a couple things I might do to make sure that I'm in the game in the PR battle. The first thing I would do is I would put up a website very quickly, a website where law enforcement officials across the country could go onto the website every day and add to the website the names of individuals in cases of illegals who have committed felonies and have been arrested and charged with felonies that day. There's hundreds of them every day. Then I would make sure that Sarah Sanders or someone comes out and has a press conference every day and highlights 2 or 3 specific cases of illegals who've committed violent felonies, or felonies that include things like sexual assault, weapons charges, kidnappings, thefts, robberies, armed robberies, homicides. And that's what I would do. Set up the website where law enforcement can put up every day these felonies committed by illegals. Also, it would be important to have someone come out and do a press conference and cite specific examples each day, every day, of another felony committed by an illegal. So that every single day they can show another example of why not having the border wall is leading to Americans being robbed, beaten, killed, murdered, kidnapped, or what have you. Every day, show examples of how illegals in the country are committing hardcore crimes to the detriment of American citizens. And get that website up so we can see it. Also, I would put a specific focus on going out into the media and laying out the facts and the numbers of exactly how much illegals cost us in everything from health care to the prison system to just about anything you can imagine. There's tremendous cost in just in dealing with the negative effects of illegals. Look at our prison population. They need to put out the numbers of how many illegals in prison for felonies are illegals. It's costing us 25 to 35, 40 grand a year to house each of those illegals in our prisons. There are great costs, and now is the time to really put the focus on that. But I would get up that website, and I would make sure that Sarah Sanders or someone comes out and does a press conference each and every day of the shutdown, highlighting a couple specific examples of felonies, violent felonies committed by illegals that particular day or the previous day or what have you. That is how I would manage my PR battle. And it's a winning strategy. It's a battle you can win. But you got to have a PR strategy. It's got to be more than just Trump tweeting and sticking to his guns. You've got to have a PR strategy to get your point across about exactly what the costs are compared to $5 billion. Because most people don't know this. I mean, we spend 100 times that amount dealing with the negative effects of illegals in the country from the reasons I just mentioned. You've got to get in the PR game if you're going to win this fight. It's a PR battle once midnight comes and Trump shuts down the government, which he should. But once he does that, you have got to engage in the PR battle and you got to win. The numbers are on your side, Mr. President. Just make sure you got a good PR team with a plan, and I've just given you one. Now, a lot of people were talking earlier today that they could use the nuclear option, waive the filibuster rule. Yeah, you could do that, I guess, but Twitch McConnell has not shown any interest in doing that. Now, he's done it for Supreme Court justices, and that was a big, bold move and the correct move. But using it on something like this, maybe. But just remember, the Democrats will be able to do the same thing. Maybe we should just waive the 60-vote rule altogether. I would be in support of that. But whether or not McConnell will use the nuclear option, it appears at this point that he's not willing to do that. There's also people who say, well, why doesn't Trump just go through the military budget and have the military do it? Well, it's my understanding, I would support that, but it's my understanding that that would require also approval from Congress, because they appropriated or approved the spending for the military budget. So that's my understanding there. I could be wrong, but that's what some of the legal experts are arguing. There's also people out there saying that we have almost $1 trillion worth of spending that is discretionary spending, and that Trump could simply take the $5 billion out of the discretionary spending. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert on these things. But my thinking is that if these options were available to Trump, he probably would have used them by now. I'm sure he explored both of those options before he got to where he's at now. I would be very surprised if after we have a government shutdown, suddenly they realize that they can use one of these other options. That would look, well, it wouldn't look good. Let's put it that way. That would not be good. So I have to assume that with all those lawyers around Trump and all those experts on the Congress, McConnell would know these things, Ryan would know these things, their lawyers in the House and Senate would know these things, the people on the Rules Committee would know these things. I find it hard to believe that these options, if they were available, that they would have slipped off the radar and Trump wouldn't have looked at these. I think he's probably looked at just about everything he can do, and the fact that he's at this position, I would think that he's finding out that those other options may not be either A, available to him, or B, easy. But we'll see what happens. I just hope that they understand that once the government shuts down, it becomes a PR battle. And you've got to win that fight. And I think I've just given 2 ideas off the top of my head. If I sit around and think about it for an hour, I could probably come up with some more. He needs to get the smart people in the room to sit around and come up with a plan for how to win the PR battle. Next up, we have the meltdown over the resignation of General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis. So we got newspaper articles all day today, all over CNN, MSNBC, and all the usual suspects talking about impeachment, military coups, and even suicide. All because Mattis has a disagreement with the president specifically on Afghanistan, as I understand it, but on the Syria move, to pull the troops out of Syria. So, to get a better handle on the Syrian situation, let me take you back to 2013. Back in 2013, if you remember, Assad was accused of crossing Obama's red line and gassing the children. Was accused of gassing the children. Now, I personally don't believe that Assad was responsible for gassing the children. I think someone else was involved in that, because it never made sense to me that Assad would purposely cross Obama's red line and the rest of the world and use gas, especially when he was winning. Didn't make any sense to me then. Doesn't make any sense to me now. But let's just go with that. So what happens? Assad crosses the red line back in 2013 and is alleged to have gassed the children. So what happens next? Well, out comes David Cameron and the UK looking to take political advantage of the situation, to look like a tough guy, and he goes huffy puffy and goes to try to get a resolution to engage British military forces against Assad. And what happens? Public opinion in the UK is totally against it, and the vote fails big time by a mile in the UK Parliament. So back here in the States, the Obama administration, both houses of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, look at what happened in the UK and they go, uh-oh, that didn't go very well. And then they look at the public opinion polls in the US, and they can see that nearly 3/4 of Americans are also opposed to taking action in Syria, particularly putting in ground troops or having a major war. There was some support for some limited airstrikes, and that's about it. But even that wasn't terribly popular. So then what happens next? Well, members of Congress on both sides get very, very nervous because they're looking at the polls. Obama looks at the polls and realizes he doesn't want to look like a fool like David Cameron, who's now completely embarrassed, red-faced, and is hiding from the cameras. Obama goes, uh-oh, I don't just want to have a repeat performance of what I just saw happen to Cameron, so I'm going to kick it to the Congress. So Obama kicks it off to the Congress and says, here, I'm going to give it to the Congress. They can decide whether or not I should take military action. Of course, members of Congress, you had really 3 groups. You had a very small group of the most hardcore, crazy neocons led by Senator Magoo and Lindsey Graham, calling for all-out, balls-to-the-wall, overthrow the regime, full military occupation, boots on the ground, get rid of Assad, and colonize Syria. Bust it up in 3 parts and give the Kurds a part of it and give someone else a part of it, and the whole 9 yards. That was one group. That was a very small group. Then you had another group, and that was a group that was people who said, yeah, well, I guess we could do limited military strikes and maybe only a 30 or 60-day authorization to conduct limited military strikes, no boots on the ground. Then you had another group kind of led by Rand Paul, which is like, hey, it's not our issue. First of all, we need a full investigation, first of all, to find out who did what, because I don't really know if Assad would do what he's being accused of doing. It doesn't make any sense. And that was kind of the group there. So we kind of had these 3 factions, and there was no majority, not enough to pass anything through the Congress because of the 3 groups being divided. There wasn't really enough support in either house within either party to get any of those 3 objectives. There was not enough support to get a full-blown war, not enough support to get limited strikes, and not enough support to say we do nothing until we find out what's happened and we get a real investigation and why would Assad do this and that type of thing. So it got kicked around and kicked around and kicked around. The whole time Obama's getting beat up because by conservatives because they're saying he's weak because he had a red line. Assad crossed it, and now Obama's doing nothing. But Obama's looking at the opinion polls and seeing that most people don't want anything to do with it. They don't support it. He don't want to be like Cameron. So along comes Kerry, and Kerry makes some crazy statement. John F. and Kerry, who by the way served in Vietnam. John F. and Kerry comes out says something like, well, you know, it's never going to happen, but if Assad would let us send the UN over and inspect and give up all his chemical weapons, then yeah, we could do something there. And then, of course, much to his chagrin, out comes Vladimir Putin about a week later and says, hey, guess what? I just got out of a meeting with Assad. He's agreed to let the UN come in and inspect everything, and he's willing to give up every chemical weapon you can find. If you can find them, fine. He's willing to give them up, take them. He don't care. He says he didn't use them, he ain't using them, doesn't plan on using them, doesn't need them. So if you can find them, you're welcome to come in here. Assad's giving you full ability to look at anything you want to look at, go anywhere you want to go, check any site you want to check. Whatever weapons you find that you consider, WMD or chemical weapons or biological weapons, you can take them out. Which, in other words, called Kerry's bluff. Which, of course, ended up saving Obama's bacon. Because that's exactly what ended up happening. They pulled they had a couple bills actually in the Congress that were trying to build support for some of it. They were trying to build a coalition for limited strikes. They actually did have a couple bills they were working on, But once Kerry made the statement and Putin answered with that ultimatum, then Obama administration decided, hey, and a lot of members of Congress, they didn't want to take the vote. So they pulled everything off the table. They had no vote, and Obama went with the Putin solution, which is let the UN come in and examine all the sites there in Syria, and they could remove all the chemical weapons they could find. And that's how that got resolved. Now, let's take a look at some of the comments that were made by certain individuals back in 2013 after Assad crossed the red line and allegedly bombed the children. How about little Marco Rubio, 2013, after the red line crossing? He says, while I have long argued forcefully for engagement in empowering the Syrian people, I have never supported the use of U.S. military force in Syria, and I still don't. I remain unconvinced that the use of force will work here. How about Paul Ryan? I don't believe President Obama's proposed military strike in Syria can achieve its stated objectives. How about Twitch McConnell? He said a vital national security risk is not in play. How about Kevin McCarthy? He said strong reservations about the use of force in Syria. How about Madam Botox? Pelosi said that she supported Obama using limited strikes but no boots on the ground. Cookie Chuck Schumer, the resolution is clear, limited and specific, no boots on the ground. How about Bob Corker? Bob Corker said, I am opposed to boots on the ground, but will support limited military strikes. How about Bernie Sanders? He said, I need to hear more from President Obama why he believes it's in the best interest of the U.S. to intervene in Syria's bloody and complicated war. There you go. Funny how they've all changed their tune. And let's not forget that they're talking about Mattis resigning and all this stuff. Meltdown over the Mattis, resigning. Let's not forget that Obama fired Mattis when he was the general. Fired Mattis. And the way he did it, very unprofessional, not very respectful. Mattis learned he was fired after a colleague heard it on the AP Newswire. He learned of his firing from another general after it was reported on the AP Newswire. That's how Obama fired Mattis. Do you hear anyone in the left-wing media talking about the fact that Obama fired Mattis because of a disagreement on policy? Yet here, Trump didn't even fire Mattis. He was willing to take Mattis' disagreement and say, okay, well, we disagree. We'll move on. He didn't fire Mattis. Mattis quit. The individual who created the GoFundMe for the border wall, his name is Brian Kovac, got a personal phone call from Jim Jordan thanking him for setting up the GoFundMe and said it had a lot to do with that final push to get the bill through the House. Well done, Mr. Kovac, on setting up that GoFundMe. It's over 13 million right now, the last time I checked. Well, what do we have here? Justice Roberts. I'm getting pretty sick of him. Of course, George W. Bush appointed Roberts as the head of the Supreme Court. He became the swing vote today on the asylum, voting against Trump. He voted with the liberals. And so it was a 5-4 decision. And believe it or not, Ginsburg, she cast her vote from the hospital after just getting 2 cancerous tumors removed off of her lungs. Don't even know if she was even in the mental condition to cast the vote, but she cast it anyway. 5-4. Judge Roberts votes again with the liberals. Thanks, W. You moron. Here's something you don't see every day. Former guitarist for the band Kiss, Ace Frehley, doing a radio interview, says he doesn't like mixing politics and rock and roll. Says he doesn't like to see when other people go out and mix politics and rock and roll. And he said in general he doesn't get specific about mixing politics and rock and roll. Doesn't even really care much about politics. But he says, if you're an American, the fact of the matter is, Trump won the election. Get over it. He's the president. Ace Frehley is saying that you either support Trump or move to another country. Well said, Ace. Well said. Love your solo on Cold Gin, the live version. Half of the troops are coming home in Afghanistan. 7,600 troops will be coming home very soon, and hopefully the rest will follow. And by the way, one more thing on Syria. Forgot all about this. What was Syria all about? I did an entire 3 videos, an hour and a half explanation of what the war in Syria was all about. I got 5 minutes or less to tell you. I'll just give you the very short version. There was a proposal for 2 different pipelines, the North Stream and the South Stream pipeline. One benefited the West, one benefited Russia and their allies. Both of these pipelines need to go through Syria. This is what the entire Syrian war is really about. It's about pipelines, just like everything else, like in Afghanistan, or Pipelineistan, which is what I call it, because everything in Afghanistan is about pipelines and poppies. But here in Syria, we have the 2 pipelines. Well, the reason why Trump had no problem pulling out is because he no longer cares about the North or South Stream pipeline projects. He doesn't care about either of them because he's found the way to deal with the situation in another way. And the way is to make the U.S. the #1 exporter of oil and gas. We are now #1 in the world in oil, and will soon be #1 in gas. And he's working up individual agreements with European countries who formerly relied on Putin and the Russians for their gas and oil. Trump is just simply signing agreements to provide them with their gas and oil. So it really doesn't matter to him if the pipeline project, the Nord Stream pipeline, goes through now. By the time that Putin gets his Nord Stream pipeline built, Trump will already have secured contracts with all these European countries, and he'll be supplying them with oil and gas anyway. So Putin can have all the potential to pump oil and gas all he wants. He just won't have the customers to sell it, because they'll be buying from us. So it really doesn't matter to have the war over the pipelines anymore. Trump's got a better plan, and it doesn't involve war. Now, let me get back to Pipelineistan. So, in Pipelineistan, we're going to be withdrawing 7,600 troops, and probably the rest as the next few months come up, and we'll be out of Afghanistan for good, and which is very good. And that's another reason why Mattis is leaving, because he's pissed off because Trump wants to leave Afghanistan. But when Mattis came in, I remember it very well. Trump told Mattis, he said, I want you to put together with the Joint Chiefs a plan for how we're going to win and then get out of Afghanistan. It's been almost 2 years, and Mattis and the Joint Chiefs have not come up with a plan for how to win and then get the hell out of Afghanistan. They want to stay around forever and protect them poppy fields. That's right. The fact is, where has their plan gotten us? We just get guys killed over there every day, and what's Mattis's plan led to? We're negotiating with the Taliban. Not a very good plan. Get out. And the sooner the better. Now, I want to spend the last 5 minutes of this video talking a little bit more about the secret envelope thing that happened at the Bush funeral, because I find it fairly interesting. And by the way, if you want to learn a really good recipe for barbecue sauce, I highly suggest you check out the Sane Environmentalist channel. He's a regular commenter, subscriber to the channel here, a great commenter, and he's got a fantastic recipe for barbecue sauce, which I wrote down after watching his video. Check out the Sane Environmentalist channel, as well as his recipe for barbecue. I believe his name is Jerome. Well done. I love barbecue. I love barbecue. Have it almost every Saturday night. I have barbecued ribs. I know Patty is probably a big fan of barbecued ribs, and I'm pretty sure that she whips up a mean batch of barbecued ribs. Oh, yes. They do it right in the South when it comes to barbecue. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay, so the envelope. I've watched these videos. I'm watching a lot of these videos, and I've seen some of the Q videos on the envelope. I've seen various other people's take on the envelope, and there's a lot of interesting theories out there. But I just want to give a couple observations. I don't necessarily think I know what was in the envelope, but I just want to give a couple observations, having watched more and more. Now I've seen the videos of the Rotten Reverend, the Obamas, Gore, and of course the Bushes and the Pences, although there's not really any video that shows the reaction. You just see that they got the envelope. But first, there's just a couple things that pop into my head about this whole thing, about these secret envelopes in the programs. Number one, I noticed from watching a lot of video that everyone within the view of the cameras, which is, you know, the first 3, 4, 5 rows, everyone had one of them programs either on their seat, under their seat, or in their hands. But not everybody got envelopes. Only certain people got envelopes. Now keep in mind that the place where this funeral was the National Cathedral. It was on total lockdown. Total lockdown. You had to have top clearance approved to be able to get into the National Cathedral. Wasn't open to the public. You had to be invited. You had to be cleared to get in there. Now, who would have been in position to place those envelopes with the alarming message into the programs? Who would have had access to put those envelopes into those programs? Who was responsible for creating and disseminating those programs throughout the hall? And someone, whoever put those envelopes in there, had to know exactly where the individuals were going to be seated who received them. In order for Clinton, Obama, the Bushes, and all these people to get their envelope, someone had to know that where their seat was going to be. Who would that be? And why, if someone was going to give a message such as something like, you're next, or time's up, or a lot of these things people are saying might have been on the envelope, why would you do that? If you're getting ready to come down on the perps, and you've kept it a big secret for all this time, why would you suddenly at Bush's funeral tell them that they're about to be captured or caught? Why would you do that? The entire element of surprise goes away. They'll go home and destroy the evidence. They'll get out of the country. They'll lawyer up. They'll do something. Why would you tip them off that you're about to take them down? Why has the media, the major media, even Fox News, I've seen nothing from them. The New York Times, nobody else is really talking about it, but we all know what happened. It's not a conspiracy theory. There are a lot of conspiracy theories about what is in the envelope, or on the note, or whatever. But there's no conspiracy theory about the reactions on the faces of the people who got those notes. And here's something else, the timing. Everyone else seemed to have their notes or envelopes in their program, and they discovered it while they were just sitting there talking to other people before the official ceremony began. And then they stumbled onto their envelope. But not true with the Bushes. The Bushes, it appears, got their envelope or their note at the exact moment that old man Bush, Poppy Bush, is literally being carried in his casket right by them. It's just as his casket is coming right by them that someone passes the note to Bush, and he gives it to Laura, and she shows it to Jeb. Right on cue. Why did it have to happen at that moment? The silence is deafening about this. But it's certainly something I find very interesting. We'll continue to work on, see if we can figure this out.